Hello everybody, welcome to episode 25 of Competitive Magic with the Carnies. I'm your host from Italy, Andrea Mengucci, and joining me today we have a special guest for the first time. It's Twinlesstwin.
Hi everyone, how's it going? This is Twinlesstwin. My real name is Max, and I'm super excited to be joining Andrea today on the podcast and talking some Modern.
Yeah, Max, how's it going? Can you say for the public your proper surname? Because it was a little bit hard for me to say, so I wanted to let you say it first.
Yeah, of course. So it's Komanowski is the American way to say it, but it is Polish, so I guess you could also say Komanowski with a V. So it's a difficult name to say for sure.
Yeah. No, I knew it was something with the Polish accent, and I didn't know how you wanted to pronunciate it. So it's good that we cleared it. So Twinlesstwin is a person that I would say we are online friends, as in we often interact talking about our favorite deck, UR Murktide. So while this week Anthony and Javier are busy in Philadelphia playing and testing for the Pro Tour, I wanted to invite a guest talking about my favorite format, Modern.
Oh yeah, I'm super happy to be here and always happy to talk about Murktide. So this should be a really great conversation.
Yeah, for those of you who don't know, Max has a Patreon together with another Murktide lover from Italy, Andrea Piemonti, and they... what do you guys do in your Patreon? Do you upload the guides of Murktide, talking about the metagame changes, update cyber guides? How does it go there?
Yeah, definitely. It's all of the above, really. Because it's only Murktide content, we're really able to go deep into it. So we always have sideboard guides. We have updated deck lists. We have videos that we make. One thing that we've been doing is making deep dive videos. So we, record a bunch of matches with one matchup. So for example, the Hammer Time matchup, how would you approach that? And really go in depth into it because all we do is Murktide. So we really want to make you a master of that one deck. And I think that's a great way to approach Modern because there's so many options and so many decks, and Murktide is definitely one of the top decks, but you really want to focus on honing your skills for that one deck. Otherwise, you might be overwhelmed. So that's why we structured our Patreon that way.
Yeah, I'm very glad, somebody's taking that approach. I remember talking to Andrea Piemonti about making a Patreon for just Murktide, because it's definitely, it's a deck that so many players play around the world, and I'm glad that, this is a thing. I have my own Murktide section on my YouTube with one Murktide video per week, and on Channel Fireball with a deck guide per month, but yours is definitely way more detailed. For sure.
Oh yeah, but I always love watching your Murktide videos every week. So those are a great place to get some content in.
Yeah. So we also launched our own Patreon on the Competitive Magic with the Carnies, where you get access to the Discord. For example, last Saturday, I talked about my thought process going into the Mox Showcase, where I played a Murktide list without Channeler that I'm sure we're going to talk about later in the episode. And I want to shout out to 6 new Patreon of this week: Glenn, Arthur, Cameron, Julian, Carl, and from this morning, Talisker. Thank you all for supporting and joining the Patreon. Okay, so I've set up a couple of questions on Twitter for you today, which are obviously super interesting, and I'm sure people will love to listen. But first, I want to ask you, Max, where are you from exactly in the U.S.?
Yes, I am originally from San Francisco, and I currently go to school in St. Louis, Missouri at Washington University in St. Louis. This is my last semester, and then I'm moving to Chicago to start my professional career.
What will you do?
It's a marketing job with a company called ConAgra, and they make food products, so like popcorn or frozen food. They have a lot of different brands that they manage. So should be a lot of fun, and hopefully I'll still have a lot of time for Magic because I love playing Magic.
I want to know, how is it going from a place that's like pretty hot the whole year, like San Francisco, to a place, if I know correctly, the American geography, where it's, very cold in the winter, right? Where you live?
Oh yeah, it's cold, and I my first year of college, I didn't bring a jacket, so I was shocked by how cold it was, but I didn't make that mistake again. So now I have the proper clothing so that I can stay warm during the winter, and I'm hopefully it'll start getting warm again soon. We'll see, but it kind of depends year to year. Yeah, I've heard Chicago is also very cold, so I guess I'm not gonna get back to the warmth anytime soon.
Yeah, very good, very good. Yeah, where I live, it's also like very hot in the summer. It gets chill in I would say cold for my standard, but the Northern American standard is like way colder than the weather here in Italy.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, so we've been talking this past Saturday for the Mox Showcase. There was this Magic Online event that happened to be, I think, a little bit less people than expected. Only about 280, 290.
Yeah, Modern is always super popular. So 290 is a small Modern showcase, but it's probably a big showcase for the other formats.
Oh yeah, Modern is by far the most popular format of Magic Online. So we ended up both of us playing Murktide, but I chose to take a route that was a little bit more extreme, I would say, as I added Blood Moon to the main deck. So we've been talking about this. If I'm not mistaken, you ended up playing with Dress Down in the main deck and Blood Moon in the sideboard, whereas I played Blood Moon in the main deck and Dress Down in the sideboard. Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
So why do you prefer Dress Down in the main deck over Blood Moon?
So it's very close because I see it in two potential ways. One is that Blood Moon, I think, offers very high upside. It can be very good against a specific set of matchups, such as Creativity or Amulet Titan, which we'll probably talk about Amulet Titan a little bit later, but it's back in a big way. And it also has some utility against decks where it's not as, lights out, game over. It can still be a good card to have in our deck. You just need to fetch 2 islands and then your mana is pretty good. However, Dress Down is a card that cycles at a bare minimum. It also helps fuel Delirium. And I felt that it was a more conservative approach to take in terms of main decking a hate card. I think both of us were thinking we wanted to address Amulet Titan to some extent and just make sure that we were ready for that matchup because there was a lot of hype going on Twitter about it. But for me, Dress Down was, it's not going to be as game over against Amulet, but still if you Dress Down the Titan, then you have Unholy Heat to remove it. And Dress Down is great against Hammer Time, which I think is another popular matchup that we struggle against. Whereas, in my opinion, Blood Moon is very hit or miss against Hammer Time. It can be very good if you get it down early, but it can be not so good if you're on the draw and you fall behind early, and then it's just a dead card in your hand. So Dress Down is never going to just automatically win you a game, but it'll always be a pretty solid option. And even, for example, in the mirror, where you might sideboard out Dress Down, game 1, you can use Dress Down to stop their Murktide Regent from being an 8/8. And if it's only a 3/3, then it's easy to kill. So there's always all these small little applications of Dress Down that I really like that makes it main deckable, in my opinion.
Yeah, this is all great points. You also played a version with Dragon's Rage Channeler, so you wanted to be maybe a little bit more, as you said, not dilute your plan too much. So just, keep the cantrip flowing, helping Delirium and stuff like that. Whereas it just took a completely different approach, becoming kind of like a Blue Moon deck, which maybe made so that the Blood Moon were just basically just became the main plan of the deck. Already from the main deck. Yeah, it was funny because we were very, of course, afraid of Amulet Titan. I played against Amulet Titan in the first round, and I lost on turn number 3 on the play. So I had the Blood Moon in hand. I couldn't even play it.
Oh, yeah. That deck has some very fast draws now. And so you have to be ready. I also came with an extra subtlety, which I think was really smart, because when you have the subtlety in hand, you just feel so safe against them. You still have to be careful because they might have Pact of Negation, but generally subtlety is a really good card to have. It buys you that extra turn, which you can do a lot with in terms of setting up your mana, maybe resolving a Blood Moon, or just if they use Summoner's Pact, they have to wait in a whole extra turn cycle. So subtlety might actually be the best card to have against them if we're finding that Blood Moon is too slow sometimes even.
Yeah, so it was funny because I ended up losing to the first round Amulet opponent, who ended up just finishing first in the Swiss. So, but I ended up playing against two more Amulet in the tournament, and I would say that Magus of the Moon, the one of in the sideboard, was also super impactful. It was basically either you have the opponent has this member or they just lose on the spot.
Yeah, definitely. It's really interesting because Blood Moon is probably the more flexible card, but Magus requires such a specific answer, and it doesn't die to Boseiju, which is the really big thing against Amulet Titan. However, they have 3 Dismember, and I also noticed the lists have usually 2 to 4 forests. So it's interesting because it's possible that they actually might have more ways to kill Magus than they have to remove the Blood Moon, because if they only have 2 basic forests, then it might be hard for them to find one to kill it. So it all depends on the deck list. But yeah, Magus I think is probably better against Amulet, and that was a pretty smart addition by you to your sideboard, just to have that extra tool, especially when you're playing like a Blue Moon deck with Serum Visions. It seems very consistent.
Yeah, so the reason why I also went for MainDeck Blood Moon is because we talked about this, I was facing Elementals deck way more than in the previous week. So I remember you did very well in an online event. Was it the 450 people PTQ?
Yes, it was that one.
All right. So yeah, how did you do there? Top 8 or even further?
I made top 8, and then I unfortunately lost in the quarterfinals because I timed out. I ran out of time, which has not happened to me in a very long time. But it was a very grindy matchup against Black Red Scam, and I actually think I was coming out ahead. It was hard to say because I was only slightly ahead, but we were both top decking, and I was going to have. I think I was going to have 1 extra card and access to Seasoned Pyromancer to make elementals. So slightly ahead. I guess it's really hard to say who wins from that perspective, from that spot. But I do think that Murktide top decks a little bit better than the Black Red Scam deck does. So I would have liked my odds, but we both had 3 seconds left on our clock, and then I had to block, and that used my last 3 seconds. So I guess the moral of the story is always be careful with your clock. It was kind of a sad way to get eliminated. But I'm sure that I'll have more chances to qualify for the next RC. It's still a long way away. So.
Yeah, so in Modern, it seems so crazy to time out to me. I often see my opponents timing out in Legacy or maybe even, in another format, but in Modern is just, I don't know. I feel like so fast. I almost timed out a match against Elementals, where I showed to you. It was so crazy. Like game 2, I decked myself. I actually ran out of cards.
Yeah.
My opponent, for 2 times, they played Endurance and didn't put any cards at the bottom. Didn't replace my graveyard, and I just ended up dying with lethal on board, but didn't have turns.
That's a crazy game.
Yeah, first time ever that I decked myself, and then game 2 I won with 2 minutes on the clock. But
wow,
the timer is an issue, but I would say that Magic Online can be a little bit tricky to go through.
Yeah, I have to
as a client.
I have to admit, I believe I started the match with only 20 minutes on my clock because I walked away from my computer and I didn't realize the match had started. So I was playing 5 minutes down, and I couldn't believe that it actually came back to bite me. But I guess that's a good lesson to learn. Always make sure you're ready for the next round to start.
Yeah, so when that PTQ happened, there was I think at this point, almost 3 weeks ago, I remember I played Creativity because I felt like at that moment, Murktide wasn't the best placed. I was playing against so many Elementals deck, so I just wanted a deck that was very good against it, which is Creativity.
Definitely.
Whereas, yeah, I still believe that there's a lot of control decks nowadays, and I was a little bit afraid of playing the version with the MainDeck Channeler, but I guess you weren't, and you succeeded that way.
Yeah, definitely. I'm always of the opinion that, if there is a lot of elementals, that's definitely something to be concerned about. But generally, Modern is very wide, and you'll play against a lot of decks. So I generally avoid making meta calls, I guess. Or if I do make meta calls, I would do what you did, which is just switch to another top meta deck. I think it's very risky to play something like Mill, for example. Even this past weekend, even if you expect like a lot of Amulet Titan and Mill is good against Amulet, you just never know what you're going to pair against. Even when I talk with my friends, some of them say, oh, like it's all Murktide in the event. And then personally, I think I only played one Murktide mirror in like 11 rounds. So you never know what you're going to get when it comes to Modern. So you can make a metagame call, but I think sometimes just sticking to the deck that you know best is the best way to do it for Modern.
Yeah, there's some Anthony's not here, but he would probably disagree with that. But I understand your point, and it's totally fine. For example, in the LMS in Trieste that I played, the paper event, I only played against one Murktide in 15 rounds, which was also crazy considering that it was the most popular deck. But overall, just know your deck inside out. As we often say on the podcast, just write your own cyber guide. Check the internet to find cyber guides. It really is going to help you in a very long tournament. Speaking of which, you competed in some paper events this past weekend, haven't you?
It was last weekend, yes.
Last weekend, yes.
The
sorry.
Star City Games. Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
I went to Indianapolis to play. It was a pre-release, was the main event for Phyrexia, which was super cool. But they also, with like the cherry on top, was they had a Modern 5K. And if you didn't do well in the sealed event, there was a Modern 10K on Sunday. So on Friday, we drove up early in the morning and I played in the Modern 5K and I went 6-0-2 in the Swiss, undefeated, with Murktide, of course. And then I won my quarterfinals matchup against Amulet. This was the first time that Mycosynth Garden was legal, literally that day. So I was, when my opponent played it against me, I think I let out a gasp, like, oh my God. But I still managed to beat that deck twice, both times they had Garden. And then I lost in the semifinals to Creativity. And it was definitely my fault. So, even as someone who's played a ton of Murktide, you still make mistakes. What happened is I had the best possible draw against Creativity, game 3, where I have turn 1 Ragavan, and then they just play a Triome, and I have the option to play turn 2 Blood Moon, but I don't because I had a very good hand. I had like Ledger Shredder and Spell Pierce, and like an Unholy Heat, I think. So I wanted to fetch a second island before I played the Blood Moon. So for some reason I waited, and it was a big mistake because they ended up having a very good hand also. But if I had just played the Blood Moon, they would have been dead. So always play turn 2 Blood Moon when you have that option. That's a very good play.
Especially against Creativity, which is a deck that just so cold to it. Yeah. Maybe some list I've seen playing Strike It Rich. That could be a way to get around, but it's not common.
Yeah, that's some good tech potentially, but even then, Blood Moon is still, very good because you have to play a card like Strike It Rich to beat it.
Yeah, for sure. And how were the prizes?
The prizes were pretty good. Well, it depends. For me, Magic is less about, the prizes and more just about competing. I'm a very competitive person. But I think for that one, it was a 5K and I think I got $500 for top 4. And then, so I didn't even get to it, but I also played the sealed event and I made top 8 of that as well, which was maybe a little bit more lucky. I don't consider myself to be a limited master, but I'm definitely a student of limited right now. I'm really trying to learn how to be better, and I've been enjoying learning more about limited. But I had a pretty good sealed pool. And then there was a couple drafts day 2 that I did all right in to make the top 8. And I think I won $1,000. I lost in the quarterfinals in the top 8. Don't draft blue black. I think that deck is not very good in this format. That's my advice there.
Yeah, that was a great weekend over there. It's nice that paper Magic tournaments are just coming back. Let's say we have a weekend pro tour here in Europe. We have the Legacy circuit. It has some quote-unquote GPs. I wouldn't call it that way. They're mostly like SCGs, basically. But and just like yours, they don't have a circuit. So it's just a one-shot tournament that qualify for the regional championship.
Yeah, no, I mean, those seem cool. I'm very happy that paper is coming back. I love paper. I've seen most of my success on Magic Online because that's when I started playing very competitively. Was when we were stuck inside our houses for 24 hours a day. But I'm excited to now try to go prove myself in paper and hopefully make it onto the pro tour. So always fun to see friends and play some paper Magic.
I'm guessing you're qualified for the upcoming regional championship in San Diego?
Yes, I am. And it's standard, which I am excited to learn. I've heard that standard is kind of dynamic. It doesn't really see a lot of competitive play right now. So it's a little bit unexplored. But I guess I can also learn from what happens at the RCs in Europe, because those are happening before the American RC this time around. So I'll keep a close eye on that, see what decks are doing well, see if anyone has some new innovations. And I'll rely on my friends who play more standard to help me learn the format.
Yeah, ours is the weekend of the 10th of March. How about yours?
It's the second weekend of April. I think it's Easter weekend. Yeah.
So it's a long time after ours.
Yeah, it is a long time. I think it's a full month almost.
Yeah. That's cool. Yeah, I'm already deep into standard, playing paper standard, playing Magic Online. I still haven't uploaded Arena yet.
But, that'd be a little too drastic of a measure. I probably won't download Arena either. I'll stick to the standard leagues.
I've played a couple of standard leagues. I played 2 standard leagues. They've been fine. Like a month ago, they were very bad with all the win traders, but so far I haven't played against any. And seems good. I mean, I would say that the experience that you get in standard is a lot more grindy. Like timer actually matters in standard.
Definitely.
Games are so long, and you don't have turn 1 Ragavan unmatched, and you win.
Yeah, no, there's no. The games are much more grindy, and there's a lot of 2-for-1s, and you may think that if you play modern, you might think you're very far ahead, but then all of a sudden they play some crazy 5-drop, and all of a sudden you're behind. So it's very different from modern, but still a cool format. I think right now it's pretty decent.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's get onto some hard-hitting question about Murktide. First question, it's from your friend Andrea Piemonti. Can we convince you to play 4 Ledger Shredder?
I have been close to 4 Ledger Shredder for a long time. I think the card is very good, and it's especially good if you're playing cards like MainDeck Blood Moon, because it mitigates the downside of that card a lot. If you just have a Ledger Shredder in play and you decide that Blood Moon isn't good in this circumstance, then you just discard it, which is really nice. But my issue with the 4th copy of Ledger Shredder is when you start playing more 2-drops, I feel sometimes the deck gets a little bit clunky, especially on the draw, which is always a concern with Murktide game 1, at least, is on the draw. I feel the deck can sometimes just not have the tools to stay on pace with the opponent. So I might be convinced to play 4 Ledger Shredders soon, especially with the direction the deck is going in terms of playing more situational cards. I'll just have to think a lot about what cards it makes the most sense to cut, and maybe have some extra spell snares, like 2 spell snares, to make sure that we don't have too many troubles on the draw game 1.
Yeah, the understanding the weakness of the deck is definitely like when you're on the draw and you have a lot of like all these reactive cards like counter spells and just expensive cards. Sometimes Murktide Regent can be clunky. This past weekend I went down to 2 Murktide Regent, which might sound crazy since the deck is called Murktide, but I feel like you only need to cast 1 at the right time. You don't need to overload with Murktide Regents.
Yeah, I definitely have seen that, and I've done that before. And I thought that it was good in specific metas, especially when the meta has a lot of Teferi and Leyline binding, because then Murktide is just not as effective. It's very vulnerable to removal, and it's hard to replay if it gets bounced. But I feel right now there's not a ton of those effects, so I'd rather have 3 because I think it's the quickest clock and the most punishing card to random decks that might have a game plan where we're able to disrupt them a little bit. But if you give them too much time, you're going to end up losing. So that's why I always like to have 3 Murktides. And I'm a little bit scarred from losing the finals of a Mox showcase because I lost to Eldrazi Tron, where Murktide is kind of unbeatable for them. But I only had 2 in my list that weekend, and I was praying for a Murktide, but it never showed up, and I lost. But yeah, I think that if you are going to play 4 Shredder, going down to 2 Murktide makes a lot of sense for making sure that you don't have very clunky draws. So that's definitely something to consider.
Yeah, to repeat again what you already said, the reason for me to go down to 2 region is that I expected, as you just said, a Leyline Binding and Teferi, not only from the Elementals deck, but also from the Creativity decks. So I just preferred to have some extra threats like Brazen Borer, and I played a MainDeck Season Pyro. I think this tech originally came from you. You were playing them in the sideboard. I think you were the first one that I remember seeing it. And the card is just fantastic with Blood Moon, because whenever you land a Blood Moon, the game just slows down, and you have all this spare red mana to discard your extra land or the double blue cards that you maybe can't cast. And the card is just phenomenal in the mirror against Scam, and in every matchup where Blood Moon is good. So I decided to just move it to 1 main deck and even have a second copy sideboard. That's a card I really liked, and it's a very cool tech of yours.
Yeah, I think that is really great tech, and it's a cool card I stole from Scam. I was like, we can play the same game as them, and it really helps in the Scam matchup and also the mirror, because the mirror, you'll have maybe 1 or 2 counter spells left in your deck, but otherwise you don't really have a way to answer Seasoned Pyromancer on the stack, usually in the post-board games, so it ends up being a good way to kind of sidestep the 7 removal spells that both players have. Just make a couple elementals. They can be good for crewing an unlicensed Terrace, or just for beating down while you kill all their creatures that they have left. So definitely a great card, and also very good against Leyline Binding. So yeah.
One card that a lot of people still play / not play as a one of is Brazen Borrower. What do you think about it? Do you play it in your list?
Right now, I don't play Brazen Borrower. I think it's a card that is nice because it's flexible, and the baseline is it's a 3/1 with flying for 3, which is not the worst. However, the list is very tight. It's always hard to find space for new cards. And where I think Borrower is the best is probably the Mirror, because bouncing a Murktide Regent is phenomenal. It can set people back a lot. They might not have spells to replay it right away, usually, so it can be very good there. I also think it's not awful against Hammer, and it just, in general, does some good effects against every player, so it kind of depends on your deck. I also think by going down on counter spells a little bit, it becomes a little bit worse, because Borrower, one of its upsides was if you could pass with counter spells up, and then you could end step flash a borrower. But with the deck becoming a little bit more focused on tapping out with like Shredder wanting to cast spells on your own turn and such, then borrower becomes a little bit less attractive to me. But it's a solid card. I always have one in my deck box ready to go potentially, depending on how I feel that day.
Yeah, so I was playing a 4 counter spell, so to me it made a little bit more sense. And the biggest reason is, as you mentioned, it's the Murktide Regent in the mirror match, and it
Definitely.
actually came up. I won a game 1 where my opponent went the same turn 2 Murktides, so one of them was just a 10/10, so like I could never take it down if it wasn't for borrower. So I would say that it's a main deck concern, as well as sometimes you have you win sometimes against Hammer where they play Stoneforge. They get the Caldra, and you have a removal spell, but you also have Borrower, so you don't kill the Stoneforge, and they spend their 2 more mana. You know what I mean? Like,
oh yeah, it's great.
They invest much mana. Yeah, exactly, and you can just get that important exchange, and because as you mentioned, Murktide is a tough matchup, but I don't know if you've also felt that way. That is way less Hammer time than they used to be, or at least online.
Yeah, definitely. I think that Hammer Time has gone down quite a bit. I have a good friend, Will Kruger, who is a big Hammer Time fan. But in general, I think that maybe what has caused that is it's a very difficult deck to play. So we might have seen a lot of people pick it up and then not be willing to spend the time to master it. I'm not sure what else could have caused that. Maybe the meta has changed a little bit, but yeah, Hammer Time is a cool deck. But going back to the Borrower and the Cauldra, that's like a great play. And I definitely think that some Hammer Time players will try to get Cauldra against us. Will says that you should take Cauldra out of your deck versus Murktide because it's very hard to actually get it to happen. But I guess it kind of depends on the opponent who you face, and maybe sometimes that plan works and the Borrower is just the only card that saves you in that situation.
Yeah, the one other reason for maybe Hammer going down a little bit is, again, this uptick in the elemental / control, more control-ish deck that probably have a good matchup. Some of the best decks are against Hammer Time. Other than that, I think that maybe we want to take a look at the what happened this weekend. This weekend on Magic Online, we had we mentioned this 290 people showcase with some of the new cards, but not that many new cards showed up. Well, actually, the winner, Manohito, has 1 copy of Atraxa Grand Unifier in their 5-color creativity list.
Yeah, that's some spice.
Yeah, that's a card that I've tried it in 5-color creativity. I was like, this is worse than Archon, and every time I creativity into it, it was worse than Archon. I couldn't persist it back. I wasn't a fan personally. Maybe they were also just trying out. In the top 8, we see 2 wild decks. We see Death and Taxes came second, which is crazy.
Yeah, that is really crazy. I'm not sure how that happened. I don't see any particular reason why Death and Taxes would be good all of a sudden. But we do see it has some plans, like Stoneforge Mystic is just a good card. You could get the Cauldra. It has Ephemerate plus Solitude, which can definitely steal some wins. And then Archon of Emeria. I'm not sure why this card is good right now, but maybe it is. And so awesome to see. I could
say that Leonin Arbiter is definitely a big reason. Again, I played against 3 Amulet myself, so having 4 Leonin Arbiter, 4 Ghost Quarter, 4 Field of Ruin must be good there. Then in Cyber you have 4 Barenton, 2 Sanctifier and Vex, so you can be fine against the many Murktide / scam decks. But still, like, this is not a deck that you have. I don't think I've ever seen this deck top 8 in the last months. So
I would.
Very congrats to Boyne.
I would guess that they're an expert at Death and Taxes, and it's a deck they've played a lot, and they probably Like you said, you made a great point about Amulet being a popular deck. They probably faced Amulet a couple times in the event, which does seem kind of like a free win for this deck. So, especially because with the new list that focus on getting 2 amulets, if you just destroy the bounce land with the triggers on the stack, then they don't get any of the mana. So you don't even need the Leonin Arbiter. You just need a Ghost Quarter, and it can put a big wrench in the plans of the Amulet player. Instead of having 4 mana, they'll only end up having maybe 2 mana. So it's a big difference.
Yeah, another deck that haven't seen in so long was Affinity. The just honestly just a regular Affinity. The only difference is these 2 Haywire Might. But the list is the old one over here.
Yeah, I love Affinity. I miss Mox Opal. That was one of the first decks I had in paper. It's always cool to see Affinity come back. I think that it's a very different deck than it used to be. It's a little bit more slow and grindy, but it still can be super explosive if you have some 0 drops and then cast a Thought Cast and then cast some free Sojourner's Companion. So super cool deck to see back. And, there's not a ton of artifact hate right now. Like there used to be back in the day. You used to, as Affinity, be afraid of Ancient Grudge and, I don't even know, Shatterstorm, a bunch of different cards, Stony Silence, but people don't play those. So there's always an opportunity maybe for Affinity to do well in an event.
Yeah, I would say that the deck that gained the most outside of Amulet with the Mycosynth Garden is Mill. I've played a league with this deck. I was so impressed by Jace the Perfected Mind. We've talked about it in the podcast a little bit, mentioning how this Planeswalker wasn't that good for Modern, but it really didn't happen to be that way because Jace is a 3-mana Planeswalker, and what often happens with this one is you -2, you mill them 3 cards, and then you draw 3. And then it might just die on the spot, but still, the value that you gained it's huge and will let you just mill the rest of the cards.
Yeah, if you can ever draw 3 cards with Jace, that's great. I'm curious, did you play it with Tasha's Hideous Laughter, or how was the deck list changed to make Jace fit in?
Honestly, the cut that I love, so whenever I play Mill, I hate Surgical Extraction. I hate these cards that are card disadvantage. I always express so much dislike for card disadvantage cards that, generally I don't play with. So overall, just like cards like Necromancia or you mentioned like Stony Silence, like cards that you just play and nothing happens. Or rather, Stony Silence, sure, it's a great card against one certain decks, but like Stones, like Grafdigger's Cage, cards that way, I always dislike them. And so I was just so happy to see this list from Musazabi that I believe comes from Demonic Tutors that cut the Surgical. And yeah, your deck is just better because you don't have Surgical anymore.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, that makes a lot of sense to me. Surgical is like such a hit or miss card where I've had opponents, like Mill opponents, who will Surgical random cards like Ragavan from me. And obviously it's very bad there. I guess Surgical is nice against Amulet Titan because if you Surgical their Primeval Titans, that's obviously going to be very good. But I think for a main deck configuration, getting Surgical to the sideboard makes a lot of sense, and the Jace does seem to give a lot of staying power to Mill. Draw 3 is always great, and it doesn't seem too difficult to draw 3 when you have 8 crabs and a bunch of ways to put cards into their graveyards. So big fan of that addition, and it's always cool to see Mill make a comeback. We'll see how long it takes before people start putting Emrakul back into their sideboards to fight back.
The reason to have the Extirpated and Surgical is, as you mentioned, like matchups like Amulet Titan, Tron, Cascade, just combo decks. You like to, or Extirpate the Endurance, things like that. Like, that's great. But they come from the sideboard to me. Like, Surgicaling a Murktide Regent, it's just, I don't know. Whenever I play against Mill, I always win because this is what happens. Instead of playing, like, actual Mill spell, they play, it's like, for the same reason why in Burn, you don't play, I don't know, Path to Exile or any other effect. You just play Burn spell. And this has to be the same in Mill. And I think this deck list is very good.
Well, yeah, mill is very similar to burn. You're trying to burn your opponent out by getting rid of their deck. So any card that doesn't contribute to that plan, you better have a good reason why you're playing it. And trading 1-for-1 is generally not good because you're all about working towards one goal. So trading 1-for-1 just dilutes your plan and then means that you're going to end up with your opponent having, 10 cards left in their deck. And even if they have, one less creature or the surgical Murktide, you still lose. So I definitely like that change.
Yeah, today I had a game. I was playing Elementals. Actually, it was an interesting list from Respect the Cat, a 70 card list, which is not normal. We've seen Batutinha doing a top 16 with 80 cards in his Elementals list. We haven't seen that much success with 60 cards. It's possible that 60 cards Elemental is maybe not, I don't know, I mean, it's strange to say, but like you have a bigger Eldam Recall package, you have some like lands, useful lands, you can fetch any type of lands you want, which is maybe hard to do if you only have 25 lands. So but yeah, anyway, I was playing as Mill, and they extirpated my endurance, my 4 endurance, and I was just at some point I had like 15 cards. I was dead to any Mill spell, but they just kept on drawing like Surgical, Crypt Incursion, Ensnaring Bridge, just not Mill cards, and ended up winning the game with 5 cards in the deck.
Oh, that's awesome! Yeah.
So, and this is. Go ahead.
Since you brought up the new Elementals list with more than 60 cards, I think it makes a lot of sense because, like you mentioned, the mana base of the Elementals deck with only 60 cards is a lot worse than it used to be with the 80 card lists. Since there's no Yorion Companion, there's a lot of flexibility with how many extra cards you actually do run. One of my friends, Zach Allen, has always been trying to figure out for his blue-white control deck how many lands he wants to play and then how many extra cards. He always says like something around 65 to 67 cards. So I'm excited to see what players like Respect the Cat and Zach Allen come up with. They're definitely masters of that archetype. And it'll be really cool to see if we can actually get a tier 1 modern deck that plays just randomly like 67 cards with no companion or any reason to do it, just besides the fact that it's the right number of cards. But it might take a while to figure out exactly the balance for that. But it's really cool to see something like that happening in modern.
Yeah, so I had Atraxa a couple of times in my head, and it was funny because I pitched it all the time. Once to Solitude, once to Force of Negation, which is also part of its, part of the card. You can pitch it to multiple cards. You see that in Legacy with Grave and Force of Will. But also just Elish Norn. I mean, I played a mirror match of Elementals, and it just came up with who had Elish Norn in play, which was I Prismatic Ending for 5. There's interesting plays. Overall, I only played 3 matches because the league paused today. There was a maintenance, but I was very impressed. I mean, the 70 cards didn't even feel like... I mean, that's what we learned with Yorion, right? You don't really lose too much consistency in...
Right.
It's tough to say, and often people ask me about why am I playing 70? I'm like, I don't really know. Like, it's just... It sounds right. Also, the Elementals cards are so strong, yet the Elementals deck doesn't perform that well.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I have a lot of friends that always tell me they want to play Elementals, and I always say they shouldn't. And then they ask why, and they say it looks so good right now. It's good against Murktide. It's good against Hammer. It's good against, like a lot of the top decks. But it always seems that they don't perform. My theory is that the decks are a little bit clunky and inconsistent, and they kind of take away a lot of the agency you have, which, I guess it depends. But for me, I like to be able to make decisions. And I think a lot of times the Elementals deck, you kind of just have to play on curve and hope that your curve works out. But because you play such expensive spells, sometimes it might not work out the way you want it to. So it definitely has a very high ceiling. I mean, we all know that the evoke elementals are very strong, but still there's something about the deck that just doesn't seem to do well in longer tournaments in terms of its consistency. So I still don't know if I recommend it, but we'll see as Respect the Cat continues to innovate. Maybe they can figure out, that what can make it that more consistent deck that can get it, into the top 8 of a 300 person event. Though as a Murktide player, I'm not sure I'm rooting for them because it's always scary to see a deck that has Leyline Binding into Fairy and Solitude. But it's also a fun matchup to play. So I guess we'll just see what happens. I'm curious why you think Elementals doesn't perform well, though.
Yeah, so it's a scary matchups, but one that I've been surprisingly just the more I tune my deck, the better I get against it. For example, this weekend with my Blue Moon list, I beat 2 Elementals. In Trieste, I went 2-1 against it. So overall, I think you have this grindy match. It feels like playing Standard, where each one just draws a lot of cards. You have to maximize selecting cards with shredders, discarding extra land so that you do card advantage by missing land drops.
Yes.
Whereas they can't miss land drops. So they just naturally flood. So you gain edge that way because they play 25 lands, you play 19.
Right.
So overall, I think that the reason why Elementals doesn't perform, it's another one. I think it's the shock lands. So your mana base just hurts you so much, and in a 9-round, 10-round, you will be playing against decks that will put your shock lands to test. So I played against Prowess, or you play against Burn. You just play matchups where starting always from 12 life totals or 14 life totals will end up hurt you. And yes, Omnath gains you life, but it's probably too late. So I think the biggest problem right now that Elementals is facing is that red decks are super popular.
Yeah.
And they will bolt you in the end. So even Murktide sometimes just you chip in some damage, especially with the DRC, and then you just annually heat Omnath with ability on the stock. They're just never able to gain life, and you just burn them with Bolt, or if you have Breach, you just Breach Bolt them.
Yeah, definitely. That's a great point as well. The meta is so painful. I sometimes, as a Murktide player, we have very good meta. So sometimes I don't even notice how much damage my opponents take off of their shocklands. But yeah, it is a big cost still in Modern to play these 4-color decks because of the shocklands. The triomes can be helpful, but it's always hard to balance. And so that's a great point about, a lot of the red aggressive decks being popular right now. And that's just a very scary thing for the 4-color lists.
Yeah, because once you fetch the 3 basics that you have, that's it. You don't have any more basics, and it's not that you stop your curve. You will need to make land drops for the rest of the game. You would love to make them on top, because otherwise you're, playing Gates, and
right.
You're still losing life with fetch lands and Ren and 6. So it's really, it's really painful, and maybe on a short event, 5-match league, or if you play locally, you don't get punished because you don't get these matchups. But in a long event, and this is why it's really important to play a deck that is well-rounded, that has a proactive plan, and just almost can fight against everybody, which is why I guess we like Murktide in a long tournament.
Yeah, I think Murktide is the best example of this deck. Because it just has such a well-rounded plan. Counterspell to some extent is always going to do something. It has very efficient cards, which means you can always trade. Talking about, with in the Elementals matchup, the goal of making them flood is something I talk a lot about with patrons is, if they have to get up to 4 mana to cast Omnath, and then you Mystical Dispute it, not only are you trading 1 for 1, but you're also, they're drawing more lands on average than you. So you're kind of flooding them out. So being able to stop those big 2 for 1 plays means that they're just going to draw more lands than you and lose. And so Murktide doesn't have that problem with a low land count. It's going to be consistent throughout the tournament. So that's why we like it.
Yeah, it's not only that. It's also we play 4 Ledger Shredder, which is a way to select your cards. You play DRC, which is a way to select your cards and consider. I mean, I played Serum Visions and Spyro as well. So, you really draw what you want to draw. Whereas sometimes here, it's just very much like you draw top of your deck, Rhino 6 just fills you with lands, and you don't really use them once. So, I mean, again, I like elementals. I've played a lot of Vivian combo in the past, and I always try to keep up with the innovations to make elementals good, because I like to play mythic rares very powerful. That's always been my brand in Magic. But there's something with Murktide that makes me always be much happier to, because once one thing you said when you said you lost to creativity because of the mistake, and I feel like it's something that always happens with Murktide. Like every time you lose, you always can find a reason why you lost, which isn't really true for many other decks.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. And it's something that I think is one of the coolest things about the deck, but also something you have to be aware of is I think that there are some decks where, especially as a Magic Online player, you might find yourself to be kind of like the grinder, as they say. And sometimes as the grinder, I know you don't have this problem because you really love Magic, but sometimes people find themselves just playing just to play, even if they're not enjoying it. And I think that Murktide is not a deck you can do that with, because every small decision matters. So you have to really be invested in the game and be excited about the game. And sometimes when I find myself going on losing streaks, it's because I'm just playing to play. And I have to tell myself to stop playing for, take some time off and come back with a more positive attitude. And then all of a sudden you see yourself start to win really close games. And it feels really good that you make those tight, smart decisions and they reward you with the deck.
For sure, yeah. One thing that helps me a lot is that I have access to every card, both online and in paper. I guess with Mana Traders, almost everyone these days has access to that. So yeah. I always go through decks. I change decks very often, and I really understand and just. If I don't like one deck, I can just simply play another one, and that's something that not everybody has the fortune to do. Like meta game, like if a lot of people, for example, are maybe priced out of some decks, and they just have to face the turn one Ragavan every time. So it's annoying. It's annoying for sure. Let's talk about something that are people ask me on Twitter. It's like the newer cards. How did the newer cards impact Murktide? So one card that I played in only one copy in the sideboard was Minor Misstep. What's your thought on that card?
Minor Misstep is really interesting. Everyone at first, I think, saw the card and thought of Mental Misstep, which is obviously it's a very broken card, and it's a card that is banned or restricted in every format. But having to actually pay the 1 mana matters a lot. So it's definitely not close to as broken as Mental Misstep, but it also has an extra line of text, which is that it counters 1 or less, which means it also stops 0 mana cards. And I think that's where the real value is, because there are a couple modern decks that play 0 mana cards that are, technically more expensive than 0 mana. So for example, the Cascade decks like Rhinos and Creativity, they spend 3 mana to Cascade. And then if you have Minor Misstep, you stop it. And then another example that, is now a big force in the modern metagame is Amulet Titan, which will play the pacts. They now actually have brought back Pact of Negation. So they might have up to 7 or 8 copies of a pact in their deck. And that represents a 6 mana spell or a 5 mana counter spell. And Minor Misstep can stop those things. So I think that's where the value is. And I guess to boil it down, really, when you play a 1 mana situational counter spell, you give up flexibility. So counter spell, the card can counter any spell, whereas Minor Misstep only counters a very small subset of cards. So you want to have upside, right? And basically the truth is trading a 1 mana counter spell for a 1 mana spell is not a lot of upside. So it's really about where can you leverage Minor Misstep so that it's a really, powerful effect. Like with Spell Snare, countering their 2-drop for only 1 mana can break serve on the draw. and really slow your opponent down. Or Spell Pierce, you can Spell Pierce a Teferi Time Raveler, and that's a really good play, right? You're never super excited to Spell Pierce a Lightning Bolt, even though you can, and it can be good. I think the same is true for Minor Misstep. So I like it as a sideboard card. I think that it also has applications against, a couple decks like Hammer Time, where like just the 1-mana spells can be hard to interact with on the battlefield. So it's nice to have more counters. In the mirror, it's fine, but people seem to think that because the mirror has so many 1-drops, it's going to be amazing. But I really don't think it's that amazing because it only is trading 1 mana for 1 mana, and a lot of cards do that in the mirror. So, but I do think where it really shines is against like Amulet Titan or the Cascade decks. I think that there it can be very good, and it's nice that it works all the way throughout the game, whereas something like Spell Pierce or Flusterstorm ends up being pretty awkward later in the game. So I think Minor Misstep might have a place in the deck long term, but it definitely depends on the meta. And when I play that card, it's not to counter 1-drops as much as it is to have a good card against, the Cascade spells and the packs out of Amulet.
Yeah, so I tried a couple of missteps. Before the showcase, I played a league with 1 misstep main deck, 2 sideboard. So it's really just like wanted to test it a lot.
Yeah.
And at the end of the showcase, I played 0 misstep main, 1 misstep sideboard with 2 Flusterstorms. So what happened was that I got paired against Burn, and I was like, all right, misstep is great because you counter Goblin Guide and Swift Spear, but Flusterstorm would have countered a million other very powerful 2-mana plays that they play and they win with against you, like Searing Blades on a Ragavan, or I think it was exactly that one that kind of made me be like, ooh, this is much worse against Burn than I thought. Like, I thought Misstep against Burn was like, oh, you counter a bunch of stuff, it's gonna be good, but when it comes down, they have Skewer the Critics, Rift Bolt, and just a pile of 2-drops. So
yeah, they actually don't play too many 1-drops. They have the 8 creatures and then Lava Spike and Lightning Bolts. I think that's it, right?
So, yeah, maybe Path to Exile, but I didn't like it. Plus, there's creativity, which I'm always afraid of in the tournaments, and Misstep is just decided out against them. Whereas Flusterstorm, you're bringing it in. So overall, I think that yes, against Amulet it's good, against Hammer it's good, but against Cascade, it's, I think, very similar to Flusterstorm.
Yes.
It's very difficult that Flusterstorm doesn't counter a Cascade spell, and Flusterstorm cannot be Force of Negation.
Yes, yeah. So I think the big thing is that Fluster is basically going to be a little bit more flexible, I think, in the open meta. I agree with you. And it probably still deserves a spot. But then, the big thing comes down to, I actually did find Minor Misstep to be very helpful against Amulet, because against us, they would try to set up, a Pact of Negation to protect. And sometimes, you have like 3 mana. This happened a couple times. I've played against Amulet and it keeps coming up. So it's very interesting that it keeps happening, but they'll like have a Pact of Negation, and having the extra 1 mana counter spell is huge. And then also sometimes, like, if you're on the play, you can try to counter their Amulet. So I think that's like the biggest draw to Minor Misstep right now. But if Amulet isn't end up being a big meta share, like if it's not one of the top 2 decks or top 3 decks, then I think Flusterstorm is just the better choice all around. But yeah, I guess it was kind of a choice to respect the hype that was generated around Amulet. But I like your points about, Minor Misstep isn't as good as you think it is against decks just because they have 1 mana spells in them. So yeah, Fluster has better flexibility there.
Yeah, that was exactly the reason. Like, it's not that your opponent has 1 drop. Okay, I'll have Misstep. All right. The other card that people ask me so much about, and I want to hear your opinion as well, because I shared mine already, but is Mercurial Spelldancer in Modern. What do you think about this card in Modern?
I tried it in a league and I streamed it, and it was a fun card. But I think that it doesn't have a lot of potential right now in the current Modern. I think Modern's very fast, and a lot of people are playing to the board quickly. And that's not great for the Spelldancer. You need to basically have it like it was at its best if you played it turn 2 on the play, and then maybe had like a Mishra's Bauble, and then you could actually trigger it on turn 3. But a lot of times it's hard to even trigger by turn 3. And if that's not happening, then I think it's just way too slow. And also not to mention Renin 6, which is just a complete disaster if that happens. I mean, it feels bad when your Ragavan or DRC is killed by Renin 6. And if you're spending 2 mana on the Spelldancer and it gets killed, it's a disaster. I think the value of Spelldancer might come in a deck that has more expensive spells or like more valuable spells to copy, which is not really Murktide. I mean, we have Iteration, and I did copy Iteration, and it did feel very good. But yeah, otherwise, I think that the card is just too slow and too fragile. I think it's probably better than Dreadhorde Arcanist is in Modern, because Dreadhorde Arcanist has the problem of being blocked, and but neither card I think is really what Murktide needs in Modern right now. I think it's better to have good defensive cards like Ledger Shredder as a 2-drop that can block well and are difficult to remove. So I think Ledger Shredder can feel safe knowing that it's not going to be cut anytime soon for Spelldancer.
Yeah, for sure. The combination of just dying to Renin 6 and Fire Ice, as well as the lack of Ponder and Brainstorm to easily set it up.
Yeah,
it's what makes it, I think, good in Legacy and bad in Modern. I do think it's good in Legacy, though. I do think that we already saw it in a challenge winner list. So I think it has a lot to shine Mercurial Spelldancer in Legacy. But I think that in Modern it's just it's not too good.
Definitely, I agree. I'm excited to see it do well in Legacy. Also, I was a fan of Dreadhorde Arcanist, so nice to see another card like that coming back in the Delver decks.
Yeah. All right, Max. I think we had a nice talk. Do you have anything else you want to say on this platform?
Well, I actually still think that you have some explaining to do, because you haven't told us about Serum Visions and why that was the card you chose to play instead of Dragon Rage Channel. I know you said you wanted to be more like a Blue Moon deck, but why specifically Serum Visions?
All right, yeah, thank you. I did forget about mentioning it. So the reason why I chose it is that DRC helps you feel Delirium for an Oli hit. So once I'm removing Channeler, I will have harder time hitting Delirium. Plus, Serum Visions is a sorcery, and this deck struggles putting sorceries or artifacts in the graveyard. So that would help Delirium in that regard. Mm-hmm. So there was like a 1-mana play, just like Channeler, and that would help Delirium just like Channeler. It would also just be a way to maybe help setting the moon. Also, a play that I love to do, I don't know if you've ever done this, is you play turn 1 Serum Visions. Obviously, it's rare, but it can happen. You play turn 1 Serum Visions, and you see Mishra's Bubble in your top 2 cards. You put Bubble as your second card, and then you play a turn 2 Expressive Iteration with Bubble on top.
Oh.
And yeah, that is something that it's so rare to happen. It didn't happen this weekend. It happened in the past to me. And I've done it like once or twice, but I always look for that play whenever I have Serum Visions and Iteration.
Yeah, that's a really cool play, actually. I like that a lot. So how did it perform for you? Did you feel that it was the right call for the weekend, or did you miss Dragon Rage Channeler?
I went 6-3, which, it's not an amazing record or anything, but I would say that the classic sentence of all my losses were 2-1, very close losses.
Of course.
I lost to Prowess, but always lost to the card Underworld Breach. Both games I lost. I didn't really lose to Monsters, Whisper, and Friends, just lost to Lightning Bolts and from Breach. So I lost to the Amulet player I mentioned. Can't remember the third loss on top of my head, but
you lost to Eldrazi Tron, right?
Oh, right. Thank you. Yeah, I lost to Eldrazi Tron. That's true. I lost to Eldrazi Tron, which, they had all this not natural. I think, they had Tron turn 3, both game 2 and 3, and sometimes, that can be rough when you don't have your moon. But
yeah.
Overall, I think that I performed well. I've sided out 1 or even 2 Serum Visions at times, especially when Anoli Heat was a little bit weaker. Overall, I think, if I had to play a tournament again, I would definitely try to play this main deck Moon again. If you want to play DRC or without, I think it depends on how many endurance you expect to play against. But personally, I like the Blood Moon. I think they're very well positioned in the metagame. Even against like mill decks, Blood Moon is super good. Even against Urza Saga decks, Blood Moon is super good. So I really like Blood Moon main deck.
Yeah, I think I have to give Blood Moon another try, and I think that your approach of making the deck more coherent with Blood Moon makes a lot of sense. So I'll have to give your list a try, and I'll report back on my findings. But I am a fan of Serum Visions. It's a sweet card. Yeah, so I think that is a very is a very creative solution to the problems you expected to face this past weekend.
Yeah, because I faced a lot of Endurance, not only from Elementals, also all the 3 Amulet players I played against had Endurance. So 5 of my 9 opponents had 3 to 4 Endurance post-Cyberd against me, which always meant that I would have sided out DRC against them, as well as just some of them had Endurance main deck. Yeah, so overall, this is my current approach on Murktide. I believe this weekend there is no premier event in Modern. I think I saw a Pioneer and a Sealed one.
Yeah, I think that's right. There is 4 Modern challenges now though, so lots of opportunities to hop in and play some Modern at any time zone, which is super cool. It was awesome that Daybreak Games did that, because even though it might mean that I might make a bad choice and join a Modern challenge that's going to keep me up far past my bedtime, at least I have the option to make that choice and play some extra matches of Modern and try to top 8 a challenge. So definitely check that out. Even more reason to get into Magic Online and start practicing your favorite Modern deck. Hopefully it's Murktide. But yeah, super, super cool that there's more opportunities to play competitive events now.
Yeah, so I prefer to play the longer one, the mocks or the PTQs, because they award the leaderboard points.
Right.
I have some leaderboard points now, so I was trying to go for a deep run on those one. Unfortunately, I only did well in one of them, the legacy one that I won. So yeah, I still have to. Yeah, these events are so hard.
Oh, they're super hard. The leaderboard is always very competitive. I found myself in the race, I think it was last season. And if I had made top 8 of one of the sealed Mox Opens, I might have ended up making it to the Mox, but it was not meant to be for me yet. I'm still a limited apprentice. So good luck with your leaderboard hunt. It can be a grind, but hopefully you make some more top 8s and get to put up a nice finish and maybe qualify.
Yeah, it's not that I really grind it. I think I just play if there's a Modern one or, Legacy one, I will play. But I'm not going to play any Sealed, or I think there's Pioneer, which I don't really follow these days very much. But I will definitely follow this week, and there's the Pro Tour. So we're going to watch Reduke playing Paper Pioneer.
Oh, yeah. I'm excited to watch some Paper Pioneer. I'm excited to see if anyone brings new decks. I feel Pioneer could use a bit of a shakeup, and hopefully some of the testing teams have a new deck that is going to make Pioneer interesting again. My eyes will be on like Lotus Field. I think is always a deck that can have some really cool innovation done. I don't know, there's the new Fastlands, so maybe there's some opportunity there for a deck that used to have bad mana to turn things around. One other... Go ahead.
I like Atrax a lot. I think Atrax is just a fantastic card that you can break it in formats like this one.
Yeah, I saw a Sacrifice deck that had the Vat of Rebirth, I think is the new card. And I think it says every time a creature or artifact is put in your graveyard, it gets an oil counter, and then you can sacrifice it with 4 oil counters to reanimate a creature, right?
Wow.
And I saw someone play that in Sacrifice, and I believe the way the rules work, if you sacrifice a treasure token, it triggers the Vat of Rebirth, is my understanding. Because
it goes to the graveyard.
Tokens do temporarily go to the graveyard.
Yeah.
So it seems kind of easy to get 4 oil counters, and then you can use Fable of the Mirrorbreaker and Blood Tithe Harvester to put Atraxa into the graveyard and then bring it back into play. So I thought that was super creative deck building. And it'll be interesting to see if that shows up at all. Also, Gigantha casts Atraxa. Super cool. There's some cool things going on in Pioneer that maybe are not powerful enough for Modern, but definitely in Pioneer, we might see some Atraxas entering play. I saw that you made a Mengucci finance move and sold your Atraxas for 26 tickets. But
I felt so smart because I bought it for 8.
Just in the future, if you could update me privately when you're going to sell a card so I know to buy more copies of it, and that way I can make some profit. But it probably won't stay.
Yeah, but I try to, like, in the way I approach Magic Online finance these days is when the set comes out, like few days after, I buy just the mythic rares. I try to buy, almost all the mythic rares that are kind of like, I bought all the Elishnorn and the Traxas and, all the cards that you would expect. So some of them spike because there must be some good cards in a set, right?
Of course, yeah. It's just a matter of time before people find the deck and then all of a sudden they spike, and we'll see how long Atraxa, stays at that price point. I don't know. Is Atraxa, what is it going for today? I'm curious.
Yesterday morning when I woke up was 70, which was insane. And now it's around 40, so it halved.
Okay.
Yeah, I have one. I kept one because, you play it in some one-off in Creativity or in Legacy as well. I've seen a list that I'm going to stream tomorrow that has Greenstone Zenith and Natural Order.
Oh,
so,
okay.
Yeah.
I'll have to tune in for that stream. That'll be interesting to see if Atraxa... Well, one thing I think you mentioned earlier was Atraxa is a blue card, which is very nice in Legacy because of Force of Will. It's also a black card, so Grief. So I wonder if there's some potential there in terms of playing it in a deck like Sneak and Show or Reanimator, because it's such a flexible card as, a creature to put into play that'll draw you some cards, or as a card that you can, if you have extra creatures in your hand. This is a problem that Sneak and Show, I'm a fan of Sneak and Show, so I've played it before a lot. It has a problem where if you draw 2 Gristlebrand, the second one doesn't really do anything. So even if Atraxa isn't better than Emrakul or Gristlebrand, maybe you can cut a couple copies of each and like play all 3, just so that you have more hands where if you have a Force of Will, you can pitch the extra creature, and then all of a sudden your dead card becomes a Force of Will and you win the game. So super interesting there as well.
Yeah, for sure. This is just a competitive mindset of building your decks. You don't only have to build your deck for the best case scenario, but you have to optimize your deck for when the deck just, doesn't perform. So
right.
This is exactly it. Like, people are playing Atraxa in Legacy now, not only because it's similar to Griselbrand, but because you can pitch it to Force of Will. And that's a huge thing, and one of the reasons why the card, I think, will see play. Like, I think it's definitely a card that we will have with us, just like Griselbrand. Like, it will be pair-to-pair with Griselbrand and Archon of Cruelty as the best cards to just cheat into play somehow, whether it's from the graveyard, from hand, from deck, things like that.
Yeah, the scariest part is that it's blue, which in Legacy is very bad because of Pyroblast. So there's like upside and downside to that. So that's why I thought that maybe it'd be interesting in Show and Tell, because that deck is already weak to Pyroblast. So it's not really an additional weakness in that deck, as opposed to Reanimator. All of a sudden, if you start playing a blue-black Reanimator deck, well, now your Delver opponent's going to have 4 Pyroblast against you, and it's very good, which doesn't necessarily sound like something I would actively want to do in my deck. So, that was kind of my thought process, but we'll see. Yeah, it's a great card for balancing your deck out to not just hope for the best, but also be ready for the worst, like you said.
Yeah, the Show and Tell, actually, the Sneaky Show might have a resurgence because they're all the Delver decks right now are playing with 3 copies of Minor Misstep, and just like in the past when Mental Misstep was full of in every Legacy deck, Show and Tell was super popular because the combo wasn't a 1-mana card like Storm or Reanimator, but it was a 3-mana card. So you can do this kind of levels. We will see how long Legacy goes. I'll probably still be playing some Ancient Tombs though, so I'll be playing either Initiative or 8-cast. That's what I like to do.
Awesome. Yeah, those are both sweet decks as well. Now I'm excited to play maybe some Legacy this weekend. Okay, one last thing that I think that viewers would be happy for us to talk about is Underworld Breach. I saw you made a tweet yesterday saying that you're done with Underworld Breach. Is that correct?
Well, so I was playing, I think it was Prowess. No, actually, it was a Mono Red Bosch deck, which I was playing Mono Red Bosch, and I played against Murktide, but they never cast a single Murktide. They only cast Breach, and every time they cast Breach, they drew maybe like 3 cards or stuff like that. And I just never had answers for a Murktide. Like, the deck of Mono Red Bosch isn't well suited to beat a Murktide. So just like you said earlier when we were talking, let's say not, how do you say, like the most, I don't want to say random decks, but like decks that aren't decks that you would expect might suffer heavily from Murktide region.
Exactly.
So in a longer run, you will play against those decks.
Yep.
3 or 4 times, and having Murktide to your deck just naturally gives you an advantage.
That's 100%. I agree. I also, you came to me with a list and you were thinking because of all of the Leyline Binding and Teferis and Solitudes, maybe we should play Breach instead. And I think we both tried it a little bit on Friday before the showcase. But what I found was there was lots of situations where I would be happy to play maybe just a 5/5 or 6/6 Murktide on turn 3 or 4. But instead I had Underworld Breach in hand. And if you miss land drops, or if, you're waiting because every land drop you make lets you cast an extra spell, I ended up waiting until turn 6 or turn 7. And then all of a sudden they would I played against Black Red and they would grief me, and then I lose the Breach. Or they played a Blood Moon against me and it was randomly good. But if I had just had the Murktide, I would have played it, and they have 2 Terminate to answer Murktide main deck. So I like to be able to be proactive. I think game 1 with Murktide, your deck is kind of imperfect to an extent, where the linear decks of Modern will eventually find a way to win against you. Until you get access to your sideboard cards that are very good usually. So game 1, I like to try to, be more aggressive and close the game, which is why I like Dragon Rage Channeler and Murktide Regent in my deck as opposed to, Underworld Breach. But I guess it's all a matter of perspective. Blood Moon also probably does a similar thing where in a longer game, it can really shut out the opponent from a lot of their, tricks and spells. So maybe that's a reason to play Blood Moon as well.
Yeah, the first time I talked to you this past Friday was because of Breach, playing Breach over Murktide, and then I just went completely in the opposite direction and didn't even play Channeler at the end. So it was definitely a learning experience that I had by talking to you, as well as playing with I was playing 3 Underworld Breach in this Murktide deck without Murktides, and I prefer the list as it is. If you like Fair Breach, the Jeskai Breach, the Fair Breach, I think it's fine, but I prefer to be on the counterspell plus Murktide Regent plan.
Yep, I definitely agree. I'm glad that we have come back to our roots as Murktide players. So
That's true. Okay, so to all the people that arrived at this point, I wanna thank you. I hope you had a learning experience and you will play Blur Murktide. Tag us, let us know how did it go, if you learned anything here. So I am Mengu09 on Twitter. What about you? Where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Twinlesstwin. You can find me on Twitch at Twinlesstwin MTG. And you can find my Patreon at patreon.com/Mercguide. and we hope to see you all there talking about Murktide. Yeah, that'd be awesome. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast this week. It was super fun to talk about Murktide and Modern. I could talk for many more hours, but I'm not sure how many people want us to do that. But yeah, it was a great conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much for accepting the invite with such short notice. Again, you will find us in the Carnies next episode. Javier will be back, hopefully with a trophy, because both him and Anthony are competing. It's super exciting to hear how the big teams, the proper pros, are practicing for paper PT like in the old days. So yeah, stay tuned for that one, and have a good week, everybody.
All right, bye guys.